Well, it's Wednesday, and I'm here around the table with my friends, as we do every Wednesday at lunchtime, and thought I would share a thought, kind of off the cuff, no preparation really, aside from a little bit of fleeting thought. Recently, started to prepare for some of the upcoming Sundays, and one of them that's coming up in a week and a half is called Judgment Sunday in some traditions. Judgment. It has to do with sort of at the end of time, when everything has run its course, God will call together all people and they'll come before God in judgment. And I'm thinking about that concept that most people don't really get too excited about, judgment. We probably have bad thoughts about that. And so, but I still have to pay attention to it and try to address it. So I was thinking, funny thing about probably all religions would be that all of them have some concept of judgment. Eventually people are going to have to go before God, whatever God that might be, according to whatever religion, and have to give an account for themselves. And of course, Christianity, out of the Judeo-Christian tradition, is no exception. And I'm thinking, well, everybody's judgment seems to be in the favor of whatever religion it happens to be. So if I'm going to try to convey thoughts about judgment, it would be from a Christian perspective. But it hardly seems fair to simply say, well, we have it all figured out. And my version of judgment certainly is the correct one, and all the other ones are wrong. So I'm thinking it's almost like if you're a conservative, you watch Fox News and you have your thoughts confirmed. If you're a liberal, you watch MSNBC, you have those thoughts confirmed. And everybody goes away happy to some extent until they have to meet each other, and then they're at odds. And so religions can be the same way. So rather than doing judgment from the standpoint of the Bible, I thought, is there any other text or any other story that I can think of that's not biblical that talks about the sense of judgment? It's kind of like, the moment is arriving, we're in trouble or not. So the best thing I could come up with, and I'm thinking about Massachusetts characters in particular, because Bob Converse knows all of them. And I was thinking about a guy named Theodore Geisel, who was a writer last century, and he wrote children's books under the name Dr. Seuss. Right. And Dr. Seuss's favorite book that he wrote, and probably the favorite of many children for now, since I was a kid certainly, was The Cat in the Hat. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about how you've got a story about the mother who goes away. And of course, this is back in the 50s, so I guess back then you left your kids alone to fend for themselves. But the two kids are left alone while mom goes away, and it's a dreary, rainy day, and they're getting bored. And I was thinking about how theologically that is perfect, because Kierkegaard said, boredom is the root of all evil. So in other words, people are bored. And his definition of bored would be you're disgusted with yourself, with everything that you have, with God. You're completely discontent. And so when a person's not happy with themselves, they try to amuse themselves and do things that might kind of, quiet that dis-ease that they have with themselves. And so you got these two kids who are bored. And what better thing to come in to start to draw up some mischief and take away their boredom but the Cat in the Hat, who is going to bring all kinds of mischief, all kinds of temptation, and all kinds of trouble into that little house. And so the kids all go along with it, and eventually the house is a complete mess because the kids let the Cat in the Hat in, and the Cat in the Hat did its mischief with a couple other characters, Thing 1 and Thing 2. And the place is a disaster. And then as the story is coming to a conclusion, you'll see in the illustration, if you're flipping the pages like I used to do when I read to my kids, the mother's footstep on her way back to the house as you look out the window at the sidewalk. Mom's coming. Judgment is about to arrive. We have we've misused our freedom while Mom was away because we were bored to get into a lot of mischief, which is kind of describes the human race. We got into all kinds of mischief because we're disgusted with ourselves, with each other, with our circumstances, and so we're going to try to have merry fun one way or the other. So, okay, well, this is a catastrophe. Judgment is coming. Mom is on her way. And so they have no remedy for fixing this because the place is such a disaster. No way can you get it back to the way it was, except that the Cat in the Hat has this machine. Remember them? Did any of you remember? Okay, Betsy's shaking her head. It's been a long time since you were a little girl, so you haven't read any children's stories lately. So the Cat in the Hat has this machine, and the machine completely cleans everything up, so all is well when Mom comes in. Now, if you know much about theology, you'll know that one of the terms that's sort of mockingly used about the way people do theology, it's a Latin term called Deus ex machina. Deus ex machina means in Latin, God out of the machine. And I'm told it comes from ancient Greece when they would put on plays. You know, you ever seen those theaters that they would carve into a wall and they do these plays and productions? And one of the ways that in a Greek play or Greek story that they would resolve any difficulties is out of nowhere would come something called a Deus ex machina. So in other words, the hero of the play, the star of the play is in dire danger and is about to die. And you see no way out until out of nowhere comes the machine, fixes everything. Everybody's happy and the audience applauds. And they're saying, we often think of God as like the Deus ex machina. It's going to fix everything, so everything's just fine. Anyhow, so the Cat in the Hat runs its machine, fixes everything, scatters away from the house just as Mom is walking through the door. And when Mom walks through the door, she sees everything the way it was when she left. All of the mischief has been taken care of. All of the damage and all the harm no longer appears. And Mom says to the kids, so what was your day like? Did anything happen today? And then Dr. Seuss turns and says, basically to the reader, how about you? What would you say if your mom asked you this question? So I'm thinking, wow, what a great illustration of judgment. All of us, to some extent, went our own way. We were bored, dissatisfied with life. We tried to fill it with fun and mischief and all kinds of things. We got into trouble, and we're thinking about how do we get ourselves out of trouble? Well, we've got God the machine who's going to fix everything so that when Judgment Day comes, everything's fine. And God says, so what did you do with your life? How do you answer? So now that's not biblical. I'm not taking this from the Bible or from a biblical text, but from Dr. Seuss, who I think kind of has a grip on what Judgment Day is all about and how we get ourselves into trouble in advance of Judgment Day. So the question is that Dr. Seuss would ask us, what kind of answer would we give to God when God appears at the end of our lives? So what did you do with your life? And maybe that's one way of looking at the matter of judgment. And then I got to thinking also, are we a little bit too reliant on this matter of grace as our Deus ex machina? Oh, we get into all kinds of trouble, but of course then God will fix it for us so that everything will be fine at the end. And then I was thinking about, and I emailed to Carolina the joke from Emo Phillips. Remember Emo Phillips? He was a comedian back in the 70s. And he had this peculiar manner about him. And he would look like, maybe he was a little different. So he said, when I was a boy, I prayed every night that God would give me a bicycle. Then once I realized that God doesn't work that way, so I stole a bike and asked God to forgive me instead. And I'm thinking, Deus ex machina. I stole the bike. Everything's fixed in the end. So what do we make of this, and what kind of answer would we give if God asked us? So what have you done with this day? Anything happened this day? And think of Judgment Day more in that way. I don't know, it's just a thought. Anybody have any thoughts?
What kind of way of living is that? Because if I can do whatever I want, it doesn't matter, because at the end I'm just gonna ask for forgiveness and it's gonna be solved just like that. I don't think that makes any sense.
That doesn't sound just, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of how I answer that, and I don't know.
That's one of the preacher's dilemmas. You ask people a question and expect an answer, and the answer comes to them as they're driving away from church that day.
I had a different thing on Judgment, but it wasn't that.
Yeah? What was that?
I was thinking of To Kill a Mockingbird,
Oh, yeah?
where there was a woman that was attacked, and then a black man was accused of it. He went to trial, and he was convicted, and later he was shot by the deputies and so forth. But the real person who did it was the girl's father. And the father tried to attack the lawyer's boys and was killed by another neighbor. And so that kind of was judgment for him.
Ah.
I was thinking of that.
Yeah. Come up and
Myself,
arrived.
Right.
Yeah. Myself, I don't know.
Okay.
Never did anything wrong. I mean,
That's true. You're perfect. Just the way you are.
Anyway, it's a good book and it's a great movie.
I think if you live a life thinking that you can do whatever you want without thinking how it affects others, or having the state of mind where, oh, I will just repent later. It'll be fixed. Just like that. You can't live a life like that.
There's no real consequences.
Yes. No.
So what we're saying is maybe there's something to be said for judgment, even though it doesn't sound very appealing at first. If there were no judgment, no consequences to actions, what kind of world would this be, and what kind of God would we have? Well, that's a thought, and that's some conversation following it. So I'm glad we could do this. This is kind of fun for me. As you know, once I get started, I can sometimes keep going. But glad everyone could tune in today. We hope you have a blessed Wednesday and days ahead. And all of you take care. Thank you.